All right, and I do see a couple people in here, so hi everybody. So today's topic is going to be custom fields and intake because there are not only some new updates, but it's always helpful to see some of that information. So we're gonna just kind of go through that, but as always, this is intended to be a free help session. So if you have questions of your own that are not related to the topic or are, just submit them. We can try to see if we can figure out how to give you permission to unmute or share your screen if needed, but otherwise we'll just help answer the questions as is. So I will go ahead and share my screen with you guys, and hopefully I have what I need pulled up. If we just give me one more moment.
Yeah, and I would say one thing also. I know we have a few people only, and people might kind of join along the way. But it's again, this time is intended to be support time. So we have a topic just because we like talking about stuff, but please, like if you're currently in front of your lead docket and you have a question or you're trying to do something in your lead docket and you need some help, or want to learn more about, like, I've seen this feature here, what is this about, like what does this mean, feel free to send those questions in here. Like this hour is supposed to be very much flexible in that sense. So we highly encourage, those are the best sessions, is when people kind of ask questions and it's very productive and practical.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and take over the screen here.
Look
And
at that Mac, Sade. Look
I
at
know.
that nice
I
movement
did
of the
see
window.
that.
Did you see that, Edie? Okay, anyway.
For
All right.
everyone, I switched recently from PC to Mac, and I've been getting a lot of heat for it, but
Look at this. So beautiful. It's beautiful. Okay, sorry, keep going.
great. So what are we talking about? Custom fields and intake. So when we say the word custom field, we are talking about the questions that you guys add to your lead docket that your team may be answering. You may be trying to get externally sent out to a client. It may be something internal, like an admin field that you guys are tracking. So when we're talking about fields, that's what we're going to say. And you're going to hear me say the word custom fields a lot. Custom fields are the ones that you have decided to add. So just a real quick, brief introduction before we get into the more complex and the new updates is how can you tell the difference? So let's just start out with your add new lead screen. And if you click on that screen, you have all these kind of contact fields. You never added these. If you worked with somebody who implemented you, they didn't add these. These ones are built in. They're called standard fields. So they're already there for you. If you got a brand new lead docket today, they would already have some of these fields. Those are our standard fields that we really are pretty limited. And if we want to edit those. Other examples are going to include that case type field and the summary box that are just always there. They're both required. But when you select on a specific case type, or if you toggle something and extra questions pop up, that's what we're talking about when we say custom fields. So we added those. They are specific to your firm. They may be common questions, but they were still something that your team decided to add into the system. So what are they used for? I've said a couple things before, but it's oftentimes your intake questions. That's the most common use for those custom fields. And there's going to be some other things, like I said, maybe some admin fields, something if you're sending out lead forms to clients where they can fill out their own information. They may be client questionnaire questions, but ultimately it all comes down to what do we need to know at the intake level. So how do we edit those is going to be underneath our manage and custom fields. So if you do not have access to this custom fields, then that means that you have not been given that permission. If you feel that you need it, you would just go to whoever is your admin on your team and they can give you that. But again, that is going to be located underneath manage and then our custom fields, which is the word that I've been repeated over and over again this whole time. So it's going to take you to this page. And the first thing I'm going to show you is actually just how to add a custom field, just so that you see it. And then we're going to look at the new features because they're very cool, they're very user-friendly, and they give you a lot more room on what to do and how to use these fields. So up in the top right-hand corner, you're going to see an Add Custom Field button. And that's exactly what we want to press. And you've got all these different options. And most of these, I think, are going to be pretty straightforward when you just read them. A true false is obviously only going to have the options for true false. A yes, no, a yes, no. Some of these might be a little unfamiliar, like radio buttons. You might just have to play around with them sometimes to click on them a bit, but we can kind of look at some of them as I add it. But for today, I'm just going to add a standard text box. So you would select the type of field that you want. And again, I'm just going to go over the basics of how to add this for right now. So right here on this page, you see a location. Location, if it's going to apply to only one case type, then you're going to choose this case type specific case details. But you do have the option to put something on all case types. I'm going to come back to what the rest of these mean, but ultimately every single one of these options is going to show you that it's going to apply no matter what case type I select. So for your common questions, but we're going to do case type specific because we're going to be adding a question for our motor vehicle accident. So display name, pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and put, I'm blanking on any question I've ever asked in the world right now, but how many passengers? And this probably wouldn't be a text box, but we'll just leave it as text box for now. So how many passengers in the vehicle? Directions is if you need any extra information that you're going to have your intake team ask. And then here you can see we decided we wanted this to go to a specific case type. So let's choose what specific case type. I said this is going to be a motor vehicle accident question, so I'm going to select that one. If it applies to multiple, but not all, you can also just hold down your command on a Mac or your control button on a PC and select extra questions. So you can apply things to multiple, it doesn't necessarily have to be all. So we'll go ahead and select both of these. And then I'm just going to go ahead and hit save. So that added my custom field. That's the bare bones if I just need a question to be in there. Let's go ahead and go to my add new lead screen. I'm going to select that case type. And now if I scroll down, how many passengers? Right there, text box. But let's look at those extra features that we now have. I'm going to go back to that question and I just like to do control find. There it is. I'm going to hit edit. Oh, we've asked that multiple times. Let's go to my field. There we go. So edit. And now instead of just hitting save changes, we're going to click on this advanced properties. So some of these were available before, but some of these are brand new. And I'm going to go over them kind of just in order here. So required, I think pretty straightforward. Do you want it to be required by your intake team? The answer is not always yes. Just because you definitely want some information does not mean that you actually want it to be required. And the reason is because that's going to limit your team from being able to even save this lead. So you might not want to make something required up front just because you know you want to gather that information. For the most part, you probably want to gather all of your intake fields. You should really reserve the required fields for things that you cannot enter this person into the system unless you have it. Something you repeatedly need your team to ask on every single call. So it should be limited to a few fields. You definitely don't want to go through and just start making everything required. It's going to limit your ability to add leads. And of course, you guys feel free to jump in if you have any comments too, but export. So this is not something that's really going to affect your users. So your intake team who's in there actively, not really related to them. This is just the ability to export it. So this is going to just kind of stay on yes for the most part. You're not going to need to toggle this over to no. This was a feature that was already there as well, just like required. And then obsolete, which was also already there. Obsoleting is turning off a field. So you're not deleting it. You've already used this field. You need to obsolete it. You don't want to use it going forward, but you do still want it to be visible on your past cases. So let's say I stop asking how many passengers were in a vehicle. I don't want to delete that field because we've asked that question many times. It's part of our past case information. So you just obsolete it. It removes it from new leads going forward. So all of those three features were already there for you guys. So what's new is going to be these other four boxes here. So hidden fields, this is going to be really helpful for people who use complex solutions, integrations, have a lot of opportunities set up. Previously, if we wanted to add our own fields into Lead Docket, they're visible. You know, you can hide them under yes, no toggles. You can try to make them a little out of the way for the intake team, but they're always there. And this now gives us the ability to add a field that you can push information into, but not something that's going to affect the actual intake team. So it's in the background. This is going to be, like I said, more for complex solutions and integrations and things where you're working with the API. If you have a Zapier account, you've got a lot of webhooks set up. if those words mean anything to you guys, then this hidden feature is going to be very helpful for you. And if you have more questions on how you can use that, I think that would be a perfect conversation for one of our future calls, which is going to be integrations, or you can reach out to us directly. But this is an option here. It's a great solution, not necessarily for your users, your intake users.
And I want to add one other thing is that's a really great field for marketing purposes, like marketing tracking purposes, because I know we've worked with a few firms that, want to track certain things that don't necessarily match the, the hidden fields, the marketing hidden fields that are currently available, and we don't have any controls, or we didn't have any controls over what's available and what's not in there. But now with those hidden fields, if you guys have that, some firms have like a marketing section in your intake that's kind of in the middle of your intake, annoying there, you can move that out and be hidden on intake, and I think it's great. I think it's great for marketing tracking purposes.
Yeah. Great. And these next three ones are actually my favorite changes, because this is something that's going to affect your front-facing intake team. The people who are going to be in there using Lead Docket, these three things are going to be helpful for them actively. So locked is actually really similar to our hidden, but the difference is that you can still see it. So it is going to still be more related to what he was saying, like marketing tracking, if you've got opportunities. But a great use case for this is, let's say you have somebody, like a third-party source who sends you leads, and they send you a specific data point, like a qualified or non-qualified, or a sequence number, an invoice ID, whatever they're sending. And you just want to make sure that your team doesn't have the ability to edit it or change it in any way. We could now lock that field. And so you can still receive the data, we can still see the data, but your team can't go in there and make changes to that information. So it's not always applicable, but a helpful addition that we didn't have before. Do not copy. So for this, I actually am going to come and show you guys, just in case you're not aware of a feature that exists in Lead Docket, we'll use faking Fakerson. And when you have multiple parties in an accident, you can create a brand new lead from one of those participants or one of those plaintiffs that were in the accident. So I'm going to show you how to do that first, just to give you some context. So you would have this person, let's go ahead and say they were in an accident with their mother. And I'm going to be uncreative with my names as always. We'll go down to relationship mother. And then there's this additional plaintiff box. Yes. So here now, if I come to this page, I can see, okay, I know that this person was in a car accident. Well, we have this as the wrong case type, but, and then there was also an additional plaintiff, Faker. We don't necessarily want to leave it like this, because that's its own person, that's its own lead. We want to turn that into a lead. So let's go ahead and say, where was I? There we go. Go back to our contact, and we've got our additional plaintiff. Under other options, you have promote to lead. When I click this, it's going to take me to our add lead screen that we've probably all seen, and you're going to have the ability to now create their own lead for this specific person. So what's great about this is all of those case details are going to copy over. All the information we had about this client from the actual incident, like the summary, is going to push over. So we're going to know how many passengers, we're going to know where the accident happened, the time of the accident, the case type, all that information is going to come over. But we don't always want all of the info to come over. So like things like injuries. An injury is only applicable to one person, not necessarily both. And that's exactly what this do not copy is for. So now going forward, you can dictate if you want something to no longer post over. So like injury questions, you can set this to yes, and it's not going to promote with the additional plaintiffs. But that way you can still keep all of the case details, the accident details, liability insurance information, all that will still copy, but you can limit it down from medical providers, and anything that's going to be specific to that individual will not copy over. So a big update for those of you who have multiple plaintiffs frequently and represent all the passengers in the vehicle, PI firms, all of that. That's a great addition. And then hidden on the add lead screen. So let's go back. I'm going to leave faking Fakerson. We'll go back to our add new lead screen. Traditionally, if you guys have added fields, even fields that aren't collected up front. So let's say you just have things on your other tab, like we do down here, or you've got additional intake questions that your first point doesn't need to ask. You don't need to go through all the questions. You just want the basic information, the qualifying questions, and then you go back and get the full intake later. But they have to scroll past all those questions. They're all on this add new lead screen, regardless of if we need it here. And now we have a solution for that. So there's this hidden on add lead, and this is going to allow you to keep fields inside lead docket that you'll go back to later, but not have it appear on the first add lead screen for whoever's taking that initial call. So a great use if you have a receptionist or a first point of contact for intake who really just qualifies the lead and then saves them and sends them to the next department. Or if you've got a lot of admin fields where you're going through and tracking case managers and referral fees, et cetera, on your other tab, and you don't want those to clog up the add lead screen, that's exactly what this is for. So you're going to toggle it to yes, we're going to hide it, and then it'll only be visible once they hit the save button on that lead. So you can go back and fill out those information later. So those are the new additions to the custom fields. And like I said, they all have their own uses, but they're all pretty exciting in their own way. So you have the ability now to come in here. Again, if you have permissions to get into custom fields, then you have permissions to edit these fields how you need to. If I scroll past this, oops, those fields, there are some extra ones. All of this was here before, so you're probably familiar with it if you've worked in the customs editor. If you haven't, then I'll still go through them right now, but this was all present previously, so none of this is new. Default value is exactly what it sounds like. Some fields allow you to default it. So this is a text box. If I wanted every single time somebody entered this lead, it defaulted to 9, then it's going to have 9 in the value. So one kind of like required, not something you want to overuse. You don't want data clogging up if it's not something that's actually going to be applicable all the time. Display this when, so conditional questions. I mentioned at the beginning when you select your case type, that can be a condition, but that's just us saying, okay, well, which one of these case types should that question pop up on? But you can make anything conditional. So I can also have whose fault, were you at fault? Yes, and have something else pop up. Let me do a better one. There we go. Is the client injured? If I toggle yes, you see more questions pop up. So if I come over here, that's exactly what that display when is for. Let me go back. I keep exiting out of things. Display this one. So I'd say when were you at fault equals yes. So very user-friendly. You just have to make sure that you know which question you're depending it on. And then FileVine Custom, which we've talked about in another video. If you're curious about anything related to mapping and between Lead Docket and FileVine, and when I say mapping, that means data from one field going into a specific field inside of FileVine. I highly encourage you to go watch our FileVine mapping call, or you can reach out to us. But that's what this field is. It's just saying, okay, well, we've got this field in Lead Docket. Where do we want it to go in FileVine? And it's a searchable field. So if we did have how many passengers, we do, of course we do. Then you can just select it. And when you post this case into FileVine, eventually the data will move over. This machine learning category, I'm going to completely ignore for the purpose of today's call. This is related to Leads AI. So if you'd like more information on Leads AI, absolutely, please reach out. We're happy to discuss, but it is not the topic of today, unless anybody had specific questions.
It's a pretty good topic though for maybe a future one. Maybe there is a question you need to ask the attendees if they're using the AI summary in Lead Docket. If you're not familiar with it, it's an AI field that can summarize all the factions of your accident and create a quick summary at the top of your lead, or create a summary of your messages or summary of your notes. It's a pretty cool feature. It's fairly new. So if you don't have it or don't know about it, you can always ask your FileVine, account manager or us. We're happy to answer some questions about that as well.
All right, so I know that was kind of a lot of information, just jam-packed and thrown, but that's why these are recorded so that you can come back and review it if you needed to, if you need to reference it. Also, I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about question placement, which can get very complicated for people. That's kind of that's one of the reasons why, you know, we have partner companies like this, is to come and help you out with these things. So you don't have to do these things yourself. They can be a lot, especially on top of your current job. So if you need help reorganizing any of this, absolutely come to us. That's one of one of the things that we do. That being said, so I'm going to attempt to explain this in a very straightforward way. So for questions, these custom fields, you'll notice one thing I did skip when I added it was there's this order number. And if I go to add a new custom field, again, up in the top right-hand corner, and we'll just select another text, you are going to see it just defaults to a number, and that's just going in order. So right now we have up through 99, so it just wants to go to 100. Which is fine when you're building out either a fresh intake, a new case type, or if you just have some questions that you want to appear at the bottom. But what happens if you guys are adding questions and you need it to appear in line with another question? So let's go back to our add new lead screen. And let's take a look at a specific question. We'll do, yeah. Yeah, we'll do the case type I made for this. So motor vehicle accident free help. There's that field that we added, how many passengers, and it's all the way at the bottom. So how do we dictate if we want this to appear somewhere actually up here? And that is going to be a two-part answer. So the first is that very first location we selected. So when you hit add new field, or you can go edit an existing one, there's this location. And you can have something in case specific details or all of those all case types. And it's going to tell you in this little tab right here where it's going to show up when it applies to all case types. So one option is in your case details, which let's go take a look at the add new lead screen and see where we see the word case details. That's right here. So that is going to add it to all case types in this box. Our other option is all case types other, which if we go look, where's the word other? I already know where it is. We're going to scroll down. There is our other. It's all the way at the bottom. Below contact information. So where's our contact information? It's this first card. So it's going to put it below here down by our conflict checker. And then the next one is going to be above contact information, which is exactly what it sounds like. We're just going to move it up here. That's how we have is the call the client. And then our final one is above the case details. So going back to those case details, we don't want it necessarily in line. We want it at the very top. So the reason I bring this up is because all of these questions are applicable to all case types. You'll see here's some data, and excuse our messy fields, but here's some data, project name, insurance, injury information. Those appear for us all the time. We have those set to all case types. So if I want how many passengers to be above those, in this situation, it would have to apply to all case types. So this is as high as it's going to go as an individual case type question. So if you guys have more questions on that or a question about your specific intake, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you understand. But anything that is all case types is going to appear above your case type specific questions. And that is by far one of the things that tricks people up the most. Because what if I want a question to apply to all of my case types, but it appears lower in my intake questions? That's absolutely fine. But you actually don't select your all case types. You put it in case type specific, and then you select all of your case types. Oops. The reason being that, like I said, anything that has all case types in the location will always be, and this is for your case details, not your specific ones, will always be above your case type specific questions. So I hope that made sense. The second part, which is actually going to involve our display order, is now where you can control where things are going to appear in the same location. So let's take a look at a different case type because I only have one case type specific question here. So let's go to one that has multiple. I'm sure our other motor vehicle accident. Perfect. So if I click on motor vehicle collision, you can see we have all these questions that apply to that. So what if I wanted, let's go to move, were there any witnesses? Were there any witnesses up above, or let's put it at, did the person at fault have insurance? Just a random location. So I need to go find, were there any witnesses? I need to find have insurance. And then I need to know what numbers they are so we can make that change. So first thing, let's go to our custom fields. Let's go, there we go. Did the person at fault have insurance? It is at number 70. Now the question I'm trying to move is witnesses. Were there any witnesses? Sorry, I got tripped up because it is at number 15. Let me take a look at that real quick. Oh, there we go. All right, let's use a different one. Again, I apologize for our very messy sandbox. We do not for real leads or real cases. Let's go ahead and just use the field that we added from scratch because that's really when you're going to be doing it more often than not. So we know where our at-fault insurance is. At fault. Were you at fault for that? Does the at-fault have insurance? It's number 70. So let's go ahead and add a question from scratch, and we want that question to appear right next to it. So we're going to add a new text box. We're going to say, what was the insurance? And how do I make that appear at number 70 or right underneath it? I'm going to make it the same number. We're going to make it number 70. So they're both going to say number 70, but they're going to appear in the order they were added. So I'm going to go ahead. Let's do case type specific because we know this is for our motor vehicle collision case. We've got our display name. We've got our order. And I don't need any of the advanced features for this. So I'm just going to hit save. And so now when we come over here, and, oh, sorry, let me just. Did my screen stop sharing?
No, we can still see it.
No,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. So now when we come over into our motor vehicle collision and we go look at, I chose like the worst questions to do this for. Ones that have, there we go. Did the person have insurance? That's what we were looking at. And the question we just added was, what was the insurance? You can see it appears right next to each other. I'm going to pause for a second because I do want to show you actually what happened before. So when I looked and I said, oh, actually that question I was looking for was actually supposed to be above it, but it wasn't. One reason for that could be if you go to your custom fields page and you see this little error up here that I've just been ignoring, you're going to say, see, the following case types have custom question ordering that will override. What that means is when you come into a case type, if you make edits to this screen, whether it's into the name or you drag and drop some things down here, I'm going to avoid that for a second. What that does is it overrides any edits to the numbers that you make on this page. So I'm going to re-say that again. So when you see this up here and you click into it, what that means is if I make a change to the case type name, if I make a change to which template it's going into in file line, if I rearrange any questions down here, then going forward, I'm going to see this error for that case type. And if I add a question, no matter what number I put it at, it's going to go to the bottom. And so the reason I bring that up is because that's exactly what happened where I faulted because our witness question was actually supposed to be an earlier number. And it's completely because we had this custom ordering error turned on. So I reset it. So if you see this, there's two things you need to do, which is one, did I purposefully reorder any questions down here? If yes, do not just hit reset. You're going to want to talk to your team who made those changes. If no, if you're like, no, we definitely didn't reorder any questions up here. We just came in and changed the name. You can just hit this reset custom ordering. It's going to fix it. So now you can control the order from this custom fields page. And again, I know all of this information is a lot. So if you have questions, absolutely reach out to us. We can help break it down or just help make the changes for you. All right, so last thing on placement. So we added our question. Let me put these in order so I can find those. At fault. So we added the question what was the insurance after did the person have at-fault insurance? They're both on number 70, but because this one was added first, it's going to show up first. But you'll notice when we did that, they weren't. I opened way too many pages. Just redo it. But if you notice, they weren't next to each other, they were on top of each other. And that's going to be the last thing that we can, or that I want to talk about as far as placement goes, is how would you put questions next to each other instead? There we go. So did the person at fault have insurance? And then what was the insurance? Yes. So I want this question to actually appear here next to it. So putting them on the same line does not do that. Number 70 doesn't necessarily mean they're on line 70. It just decides that they're next to each other. What we actually need to look at is the column width. So inside Lead Docket, this is on a column of 12. It's invisible. You're never going to need to know that other than using these custom fields, but you can just pretend that there's 12 imaginary columns here. And so if I want these questions to appear next to each other, they need to be next to each other in those columns. So I can do 6 and 6. I could do 4 and 8. Whatever adds up to 12 is going to determine how much space they take up in those columns. So I'm going to show you right now. So we've got, did the person at fault have insurance? It's right next to it. So let's go in to this question. You're going to see this column wides right next to your display order. And I want this one to be, we'll just do 6 and 6 to start with. Save. And what was the insurance? We're going to make that one 6 too. So both of those questions are now 6 and 6, which adds up to 12. And now when I refresh and go back down, select my case type. What was the insurance? There we go. So now we have, did the person at fault have insurance? And instead of being underneath it, it is right next to it. What was the insurance? So you can do that with any questions. You just want to make sure that the questions that you want next to each other do add up to 12. If they don't, it's not that big of a deal, but sometimes the questions can just kind of bump up next to each other. They might appear in the wrong spot. You may have questions that you didn't want to be next to each other. So as long as the ones you want on the same line add up to a value of 12, then you're not going to mess with the other questions. And when I say add up to a value of 12, I mean because you can do more than just those two. So if we wanted to have 3 on a line, then instead of 6 and 6, we could do 4, 4, and 4. So there's a couple different options, but that is how you get them on the same level. And you don't have to click into them to see that column width. If we scroll all the way up to the top, you're going to see this column visibility. I can select columns there so that as I scroll, I can see which of my questions are either taking up the full 12. So this means it's just one question on its own, or questions that we may have stacked next to each other. So here I can see we've got a 4, 4, and 4. So I know that those questions are set to appear next to each other. And that looks like it's on our other tab. So if I scroll, I probably can show you that. Yep, here it is. So we've got question, 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 4, 4, 4, which equals 12. So I know the second half of this has turned into a lot of information, and that's because placement can be a little bit difficult to learn in a new system. It's a little different than the FileWine side, but there's a lot of overlap. So I will say for the final time from my mouth, if you have questions on this, if you'd like some support, if you'd like just us to review your fields and let you know how you could organize them better, that is absolutely something that we're here for. Okay, I'm tired of hearing my own voice. Do you guys have anything that you'd like to add to what I said?
I think you did a great job. I think you covered a lot in a short period of time.
Yeah, it was some great information. I think that a lot of times too, when you have already launched and let's say you get a new template in your file line and you want to add it into Lead Docket, want to add that intake, just be mindful that there's it can get a little confusing with updating those fields and adding those case types. Shade, I don't know if you want to talk about the options we have with that when it comes to adding a new template in FileVine once you've already been launched and adding that intake inside of Lead Docket.
Yeah, we can touch on that a bit. So what she's referencing here is when you hit that add a lead button, that case type field that we've used every single time, This is a very important field in Lead Docket. It drives most of the reporting, a lot of the filters, a lot of what you do is going to be dependent on this. And when she says template, if you are a FileVine customer, then you have project types inside FileVine. So typically you'll have like-minded case types within the same project. So you might have a personal injury project, and then you might have an employment law project. And those are going to be two different project types. But you don't necessarily just want to have PI and employment here, because like I said, they drive everything. We want to make sure we can ask specific questions for motor vehicle collisions, dog bites, premise, all sorts of, the different case types. And so what we actually do is we break them down like this. So that's why you can see there's multiple types of PI in here. If we had multiple types of employment law, if we wanted to track, discrimination separately from the other ones, then we would put each of those as its own case type. It's not applicable for everything, things like criminal or immigration, where you can have thousands of different case types. You probably won't do that, but just the most important ones that you need to be a driving force for your intake and for your reports, and your workflow. And what she means is when you add either a new project type inside your FileVine, so let's say you start taking on a brand new practice area, work comp. We'll go ahead and use work comp, which can fall under PI, but a lot of times it's tracked differently. So if you guys start doing work comp and you add a whole new template and you're ready to bring that intake into FileVine or into Lead Docket, there's a lot involved, because one, we need to add the case type, which is done here under our case types. We need to determine which FileVine project template it's going to open. We don't want it to open a PI case type. We want it to open the work comp template. And then we also need to go in and add all those questions that are applicable for work comp to the work comp case type in our custom fields. And where that complication can happen is when there's overlap. There's going to be a lot of the same questions that appear on your work comp template that appear in your PI template or your questions. So we may need to end up actually reusing some of these questions and mapping them, and then bringing in the questions that aren't there. And so you can come in here, let's say briefly describe injuries, for example, and I hit edit. If that question is going to be added to my brand new work comp case type, I'm going to have to come in here. I'm going to have to select it here and hit save. And that's just step one. Then we have to go through and do the rest of the questions, bring in any questions that aren't in there. And then what really gets complicated is the mapping piece, which once again, I don't want to dive too deep into on this. We do have a separate recording on, but we do individually map some questions. So we'd have to go in and then say, okay, when they go to the PI template, they go to these fields. When they go to the work comp template or project type in FileVine, they go into these fields. Was that what you were talking about, Edie?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
The one other thing that I would only mention, I know we're kind of we went through most of our webinar here. The one other thing that I think is nice and people often don't know about it or kind of overlook is the ability to do status required fields. I know there's been something that people ask for a while. Now it's available, and they didn't communicate, I think, to many people. So the ability to select certain fields to be required on certain statuses only. So as Shade mentioned in the beginning of the call, using required field is great, but you have to be careful with it, because that when you put something as required, you have to put something in there before you create a lead. So one example that I know I always get is, for example, I think even like an accident date or something that you would assume that you have it, but sometimes your intake may want to save that lead without this data, and then they're going to get it later. If it's required field, then you can't do it. You have to put something in there, and you don't want to be using like dummy data, putting zeros or putting ones, because then you start skewing your numbers. So now you have the ability to say, before you put something in there signed up, this field needs to be, filled out. So I think that's a nice kind of feature that people often miss in there.
Yeah, a lot of times it could be, those conflict checks, kind of fields, the yes or no that you want for reporting purposes. You don't want to add it at the very beginning of the lead because, you're still having to do the consult, but you might want to add it once we move it or get a retainer or getting ready to send a retainer to do a conflict check.
Yeah. Yeah, those are both perfect examples. And just to show you guys what they're talking about. So here you can see if I try to add a brand new lead, and I'm just going to use is the client injured as an example, this is not a required question. So I have the ability to save this without hitting yes or no. And if I don't want to make this required just yet, where we can do it is we can make it status required. So let's say before Evie's example, before you actually send a retainer, so before you put them in pending sign up, we want to make sure you have that information. You can come into your status, which this is located underneath manage statuses, and you do have to be an admin to control this. But you can come into the statuses page, scroll all the way down to the bottom, and then this is where you can do required fields. So here I'd say, okay, well, is it all my case types or just some? And I think that one is probably in multiple. So let's see. You can just come down to your required field and search is the client. It's not, but so we would just have to determine which case type that was in. There we go. Is the client injured? Yes, no. And this, if I just save, is going to say they have to answer that question. But now you can also go even further and say, in order for them to put them in pending sign up, not only do I want them to answer it, it also has to be a yes. And save. And so now they won't be able to put somebody into that status unless they have answered yes, or if you leave that part out, they've answered the question at all. All right, so that was a lot of information. I don't think we have any questions from anybody on the attendee side. Anything that you guys saw pop up?
No, I think that's good. If anybody has any questions, now is the time. Before we close this off, but hope this was helpful. This was pretty good, Shade. I think this will be a really good recording later for anybody wanting to understand custom fields. I'm glad we did it.
All right. Well, I think we're all set then. Our next free help, it's always the first Wednesday of each month. Did I say that correctly? Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
And the topics are usually announced ahead of time on the website. But of course, this is first and foremost always intended to be a free help session. So if you have your own issues, if you've got your own questions, anything, you are always welcome to reach out to us then or separately, or come to these sessions and we can work it out Socratic seminar style.
Right. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good job, Shadi. That was great.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.